It was January 12, 1984. The snow in Redfield, Pennsylvania didn't fall, it settled, as if the sky had decided to place a quiet white hand over the town and say, "Hush now." Streetlights wore halos, mailboxes became white shoulders, and County Road 9, a two-lane ribbon running past the river and into the pines, looked like it was leading nowhere at all. At 2:47 a.m., a freight driver named Daniel Price eased off the gas. Up ahead, a car on the shoulder, headlights on, engine running, driver's window frosted with a breath pattern that didn't move anymore. Price pulled in behind it, hazard lights throwing orange across the drifts. He stepped into the kind of cold that clicks in your teeth. The road was dead silent, except for the hum of the idling sedan and the faraway scrape of a snowplow miles downriver. He rapped his knuckles on the glass. No response. He opened the door. The cabin light came on, a dome of pale yellow over a woman's face, mid-20s, hair pinned behind one ear, a wool coat buttoned to the throat. Her name, he would learn later, was Laura Green. She was slumped toward the wheel, chin tucked, like she'd fallen asleep in a bad place and dreamed herself somewhere warmer. Only she wasn't sleeping. Price saw the small black flower blooming on her coat center chest. He didn't understand it at first. Then he saw the color in the seams. Then he saw the .38 casing on the passenger seat, one thin golden cylinder catching the dome light like a tiny lantern. He stepped back, not breathing. His footprints dented the powder like coins pressed into dough. He ran for the cab, for the radio, for anyone's voice. In Redfield, the coroner's van had a familiar rattle, and the police station had a coffee pot that never turned off. That night, both were working. Detectives Tom Miller and Eric Hayes arrived with steam lifting from their collars. They didn't talk much. Miller checked the door. No pry marks. Hayes checked the glove box. Registration, insurance. An envelope, folded once, addressed in a neat, almost schoolteacher hand to nobody at all. They read it there, with the engine idling and the snow thickening again. "I forgive you. M." They bagged the casing. They photographed the cabin. They followed footprints around the car, a single loop from the driver's side to the front grille and back, all small steps, all hers. No second set, no drag marks, no scuffle in the powder. One shot, no robbery, no struggle, no witnesses. And a road that swallowed sound. 1. The town and the teacher. Narrator. Redfield in '84 was a town of 6,000 and a memory for every door. It had a diner that closed at 9 and opened at 5, a feed store that sold rubber boots next to salt blocks, and a school whose PA system liked to whistle when it rained. Laura Green taught 4th grade there. She had a habit of writing the date in cursive on the chalkboard and underlining Fridays twice. She wore the same wool coat for 3 winters and mended the cuffs herself. She lived in a rented upstairs of a brown house with slanted ceilings and a kitchen window that overlooked the river. If you asked her students, they'd tell you she smelled like pencil shavings and peppermint. If you asked her colleagues, they'd tell you she carried more than books home. Not secrets exactly. Wait. In the weeks before her death, the school's front office logged 2 calls for Miss Green. Both from payphones. Both men's voices. Both messages short and strangled with static. You think you're safe. Rhodes, remember. The secretary wrote that last line down because it gave her goosebumps. Laura didn't report any threats. She said the calls were a wrong number. She smiled when she said it, a good smile, tidy as a wrapped gift, but her hands twisted the strap of her bag until her knuckles went pale. She was engaged, spring wedding. Mark Henderson, a mechanic who worked out of his father's garage on Merton Street. He had a clean jawline and a clean record. He also had a brother. Michael Henderson, 3 years older. He lived alone on the edge of town in a rented one-story with a yard the snow never looked comfortable falling on. He'd left high school for work, then left work for trouble, and then, mostly, left town. When Laura died, people said the things small towns say when they're scared. It must have been a drifter. It was a robbery gone wrong. Not one of us. But Redfield is the kind of place where one of us is the only kind there is. 2. The last day. On January 11th, school let out early for weather. Students were collected in convoys of mufflers and mittens. Laura stayed late to finish a stack of graded spelling tests, the red ink bright against the blue lines. She spoke to Principal Audrey Bell in the hallway about a field trip to the museum once the thaw came. She locked her classroom at 6:12 p.m., the custodian noted, because the lock stuck and needed a jiggle, and he always timed it like a trick. She stopped by the Maple Diner for chicken soup and crackers. The waitress, Jeanette, said Laura sat by the window and wrote in a notebook for 15 minutes, then crossed something out hard to tear the page. She left a tip too big for soup and wished Jeanette a warm night. At 7:40 p.m., she was seen at the Henderson garage, a rectangle of fluorescent light in a curtain of dark. Mark was under a Dodge, boots poking out, radio playing a ball game. They talked in the doorway. He wiped his hands and touched her cheek with the back of one knuckle, gentle as if testing fresh paint. A neighbor heard laughter. Another heard a door close too quickly. At 8:10 p.m., Laura drove east, past the river, past the mill, toward County Road 9, where the plows were late and the pines blew snow off their backs in slow white dog shakes. At 2:47 a.m., Daniel Price found her. Between those times, Redfield holds its breath. 3. The first look. Detectives Miller and Hayes didn't like tidy scenes. Tidy is a lie. A real crime breathes. It scuffs, it bends, it stains. Laura's car looked like a picture in a manual. One bullet, one casing, one victim who hadn't had time to be anyone else. They bagged the letter, "I forgive you, M." They bagged a lipstick tube without a cap. They bagged a receipt from the Maple Diner at 7:26 p.m. Soup, coffee, 90 cents tip. They bagged a library book on the passenger floor, The Stranger Beside Me. They bagged a broken pencil point from the dash tray. And they took the casing last, pinched at the knurled rim with tweezers, the number WCC38SPL, faint like old breath. No prints on the casing, no prints on the dash, except hers. The steering wheel told nothing. She drove with gloves. Whoever was with her didn't touch much. Or, and this is what Hayes said to Miller at 4:10 a.m. when their tongues felt numb, whoever did this didn't have to touch anything at all. They notified next of kin at 4:36 a.m. The door in the Brown house opened to a hallway of shoes and a calendar with a red heart around April 14. Mark stood in a t-shirt, arms wrapped around nothing. He said her name twice, like it might come back to him on the second try. He answered questions, because there are questions you have to answer when the world tilts and the floor keeps pretending to be flat. Where were you after 8 p.m.? Garage, then home. Anyone see you arrive? My father called about a carburetor at 9. Phone records will show. Did Laura have enemies? No. He asked once, was it a robbery? When they said no, he closed his eyes, like the answer hurt worse than the question. 4. The note. The note settled over the case like a film you can't wipe off. I forgive you. M. Forgive you for what? And who is M? Miller, methodical, wrote down every M in Laura's life. Mark, the fiancé. Michael, the brother. Mrs. Bell, principal, but the M was a stretch. Maple Diner, place, not person. Meredith Clark, colleague, third-grade teacher, friend who once cried in the faculty lounge after a divorce hearing and had Laura's handkerchief in her purse ever since. They took samples of handwriting where they could. Mark's was compact, left-leaning. Michael's, when they got it from a job application at Ryder Lumber, was blocky and impatient. Meredith's was a looping river of ink. The note matched none of them. The strokes were neat, textbook, a teacher's hand, but not Laura's. A facsimile, someone trying to look polite. You can wear another person's coat with enough practice. Sometimes you can wear her handwriting too. 5. The phone calls. The school secretary's log, a ledger with gold edges and a spine louder than the librarian, listed 2 calls in December, both labeled mail voice, both payphone, one from Merton Street outside the grocery, one from Highway 12 by the bus stop. You think you're safe. Roads remember. Hayes hated payphones. They were fingerprints' enemies. They were strangers' best friends. In 1984, you can't pull a map of who called whom at what time with a thumb. You drive, you ask, you trade coffee for minutes. Redfield mourned Laura Green the way small towns mourn, with casseroles in foil and poems in church bulletins, and 100 small tasks that make a hole in the world look patchable. The police file grew heavier without getting thicker. Miller tucked the casing's lab report into a manila folder and wrote one word on the tab: cold. But cases don't go cold. People do. The case just waits. Waits for a voice to crack at the wrong time. Waits for a machine that can see what eyes can't. Waits for a brother to move out of state and take his silence with him. Waits for 21 winters to pass so that a single print, half a whirl on brass, can come back from the dark and say, "I remember." Morning came late to Redfield that winter. The sun rose like a weak light bulb behind the clouds, and people walked slower, as if noise itself could break the town. By 9 a.m., the school knew. Children whispered the way children always do when they don't understand death but can smell it on the adults. The flag went to half-mast. Principal Audrey Bell locked herself in the office and cried over the intercom's static. 1. The circle closes. Detective Miller called the meeting the circle. He drew it on a chalkboard. Laura Green in the center, names radiating out like compass points. Mark Henderson, fiancé. Michael Henderson, brother-in-law. Meredith Clark, friend and colleague. Daniel Price, witness. Unknown caller. Roads remember. Every case starts with a circle. You push the edges until somebody falls out. 2. Mark Henderson. Mark's grief looked neat, almost rehearsed. He fixed his hair before interviews, said sir and ma'am like punctuation. When asked about the note, he said he'd never seen it. When asked about the gun, he said he didn't own one. When asked about his brother, he hesitated. Michael's been off since Mom died. He doesn't like to be told no. He provided pay slips proving he'd worked late, and the phone record showing the 906 call. But time is a fluid witness. It moves to whoever stares at it hardest. The detectives marked his alibi provisional. That night, Mark slept on his couch with the TV on, because silence was starting to sound like accusation. 3. Michael Henderson. Michael had eyes like pond water, still until you stepped too close. He told the detectives Laura's death was a damn tragedy and that he hadn't spoken to her in months. Yet a receipt from the Riverlight Tavern, timestamp 9:02 p.m., bore his signature. 1 beer, 1 shot, paid cash. He claimed he left before 10. The bartender wasn't sure. He watched the door more than the game, she said. Hayes wrote that down. Watched the door equals waiting for someone? Behind Michael's rented house sat tire tracks leading nowhere. Snow covered them by morning, but the impression stayed in Miller's head like a photograph burned in too long. 4. Meredith Clark. Meredith was the opposite of darkness. Bright scarf, loud laugh, coffee cup that said, "Teach, love, repeat." She'd taught beside Laura for 4 years and called her my sanity. At the station, she twisted her wedding ring the whole interview. Laura was happy, excited about the wedding. She worried about money sometimes, and about a car that followed her home one night. She said it was a dark Chevy, no plates she could see. That detail never made the paper. Only a handful of people knew it afterward. Which meant, later, when an anonymous letter arrived at the station reading, "It was the Chevy you ignored," Hayes felt his skin go cold. 5. The town talks. Redfield lived on rumor. Every gas station had its own detective. At Carter's Hardware, they said it was a jealous student's father. At the Maple Diner, it was Mark. At the Riverlight, it was the brother, because he's the kind who doesn't look you in the eye. None of them were completely wrong. None were completely right. Truth in small towns is like snow. Everybody owns a shovel, and nobody can find the driveway. 6. The gun trail. The ballistics lab confirmed the bullet was .38 Special. There were only 3 registered owners in the county. One was a retired sheriff, one was a night guard at the mill, and one was a pawn shop receipt, unsigned because 1984 didn't care about paper as much as guns. The pawn shop owner, Eddie Moss, smoked while he talked. "I sold 3 .38s last year. One to a lady teacher, maybe her? Nah, she never came back. One to a mechanic boy. One cash, no name." He remembered the mechanic had dirty hands and paid with crumpled 5s. Mark's hands were always dirty, but so were Michael's. 7. The funeral. The church smelled of pine and paraffin. Laura's students sang off-key, and the pastors talked about light. Mark cried like a man who hated to be seen crying. Michael didn't show up until the last amen, standing in the doorway like a shadow that had forgotten its body. Meredith read a poem, the line everyone remembered. "The road does not forgive, but it remembers." Later, when Detective Miller heard that, he closed his notebook and stared at the ceiling because the words were too close to the calls. 8. A lead in ash. Winter burned slow. Then March arrived, and a kid hiking near the river found something shiny under the ice. A small silver locket. Inside was Laura's photo and a smear of blood. The chain was broken, the clasp snapped clean. Mark swore she'd been wearing it the night she died. Forensics could do little. They preserved it, photographed it, filed it away. Miller added a note, "Dropped or ripped off." He didn't know then that this locket would surface again 21 years later inside a box marked "Cold Cases, Redfield." 9. Meredith's secret. In April, Meredith came to the station with something in a plastic bag. A stack of letters. She said Laura had given them to her for safekeeping the week before the murder. Most were from Mark. Routine, mundane, love letters with grease smudges and jokes about car parts. But one was different. No return address. Typewritten. "You chose the wrong brother." The detectives sat back at the same time. A small sound in the room, the case locking itself again from inside. They ran the typewriter font through records of machines owned by the school. 2 matched, one in the front office, one in the shop class. Michael had dropped out of that class his senior year. The teacher remembered him because he'd filed the serial number off the shop's demo gun. 10. Silence and steel. The garage stood empty that spring. Mark had closed it for repairs. Neighbors said they heard a metallic clank every night around midnight, like someone beating on something that refused to break. When Miller and Hayes searched it, they found nothing illegal, just a locked tool chest Mark refused to open without a warrant. They never got one. The DA said circumstantial isn't probable cause. Inside the drawer they could see through the vents a corner of red fabric. Laura's coat was red. They walked away in snow that was melting and felt like ash. 11. The case cools. By summer, press interest moved on. Miller transferred. Hayes stayed and drank more coffee. The file got a stamp no detective likes to read. Unsolved. But the road, that quiet, snow-bent road, didn't care about stamps. It kept its nummery in layers: rubber, salt, blood, and regret. And somewhere under it all lay a truth still breathing slowly in the dark. By the spring of 1985, the snow was gone, and so was momentum. Files stacked high on Detective Hayes's desk like gray tombstones. Miller had transferred to Harrisburg. The Redfield PD was back to parking tickets and bar fights. Only Hayes kept looking at the case file like it was a living thing pretending to sleep. He'd drive County Road 9 once a week, windows down even when it was freezing. He said he listened for something, not traffic, not birds, just something. But roads don't talk back, they only echo. 1. A new chief. When Chief Dobson retired, his replacement, Al Reeves, wanted results fast. He called Laura Green's murder an open sore. He also called it unprofitable. 2 months later, the Cold Road case moved from active investigation to archival. That meant one thing: boxes in a basement. Hayes protested. Reeves said, "You can't chase ghosts when you're out of gas." Hayes answered, "Maybe the ghost left footprints." Reeves didn't laugh. Q. Faint ticking, 15%. 2. Missing evidence. August 1985. The Redfield County Courthouse flooded after a pipe burst. Boxes from the evidence room floated like coffins with labels. When volunteers pumped the water out, 2 envelopes were missing. Envelope number 7, casing and fingerprints, Laura Green case. Envelope number 12, anonymous letters, typewritten. Reeves called it an accident. Hayes called it sabotage. The insurance report called it act of God. God, apparently, liked tidy cover-ups. 3. Mark moves on. By 1986, Mark Henderson had sold the garage and left town. He moved 2 counties west, remarried within a year, opened another shop. He told friends he wanted a clean start. But Redfield didn't forget. Old ladies whispered his name whenever they saw a red car. Teenagers dared each other to drive County Road 9 at midnight, headlights off, chanting, "Laura, are you there?" They said sometimes the engine died for a second. Hayes checked. Batteries, not ghosts, but he liked that the story kept her alive. 4. Michael's vanishing act. Michael drifted. Different jobs, different towns. No address lasted more than 6 months. In 1988, he was arrested in Ohio for bar assault, served 90 days, then disappeared again. When Hayes phoned the Ohio PD for fingerprints, they said the cards were lost in a clerical error. He started to see a pattern. Every trail ended in water, fire, or paperwork. He wrote in his diary, "Whoever killed her has the devil's filing system." 5. Meredith breaks. Q. Soft piano, 20%. Meredith Clark held out the longest. She kept teaching, kept visiting the cemetery every Sunday. In 1990, she suffered a nervous collapse mid-class. She was found sitting at her desk, hands flat, saying the same sentence again and again. "I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you." The students didn't understand, but one wrote it in a journal later, the same words as the note from Laura's car. Meredith was hospitalized, released 2 years later, retired early, moved to Florida. She told a reporter, "Some roads don't end, they just circle back." 6. The town forgets publicly and privately remembers. Through the 1990s, Redfield grew quiet again. A new mall opened by the river. Teenagers talked about MTV, not murders. But every winter, when snow covered County Road 9, someone left a bouquet of fake red roses by the mile marker. No footprints ever found, no camera ever caught it. Hayes took the bouquets each year to the station storage room. By 1997, there were 12. He never opened them to check for fingerprints. Some mysteries feel like spells. Break them and the world goes flat. 7. The DNA Whisper. In 1993, the state launched its first DNA database. Hayes drove to Harrisburg to ask if old evidence could be tested. The lab technician laughed. "You got a hair sample from '84 that's not mold by now?" But the idea stuck. He collected every remaining scrap from the case file: photos, blood slides, the locket. He sent them at his own expense for preservation. The report came back: DNA too degraded to sequence. Still, one line gave him hope. Partial profile may be retrievable with future tech. He circled it twice, like a promise to a dead friend. 8. Hayes retires. After 28 years on the force, Detective Eric Hayes retired. He packed his desk into a single box: one badge, 2 photos, and a folder labeled Cold Road. He took it home, even though he wasn't supposed to. His wife asked why he kept it. He said, because it's not done talking. That night, he placed the folder on the kitchen table, made a drink, and listened to a storm crawl across the roof. The light flickered once, twice, then went out. When the power returned, the folder was open, pages shifted as if someone had been reading. He smiled and said to no one, "Good, you're still here." 9. A letter in 1998. 2 weeks after retirement, Hayes received an envelope postmarked Ohio. No return address. Inside, a single sentence typed on yellow paper: "You were right about the brother." The letter was signed M. He read it 10 times. Then he called his old partner Miller. Miller had moved on, had grandkids, had forgotten how to believe in coincidence. He said, "Throw it away, Eric. Don't let the dead drive you." Hayes didn't. He slid the letter into the folder, sealed it, and wrote on the tab in new ink, 1984, to be continued. Cue, faint wind, 10% for 8 seconds, then fade. Epilogue of a decade. By the end of the 90s, almost everyone connected to the case had left Redfield. The town grew a supermarket, a stoplight, and a conscience it didn't use. Kids no longer knew who Laura Green was. But every January, the river froze a little deeper than the year before, as if something beneath it was trying not to surface. And it wouldn't. Not until 2005.
2 decades after Laura Green's death, the world had changed, but Redfield hadn't. The diner now sold cappuccinos, the school had Wi-Fi, and County Road 9 still froze in January like a scar that refused to heal. In April 2005, the state formed a new cold case task force. Detective Rachel Moore, 32, transferred from Philadelphia. She had short hair, sharp eyes, and no patience for ghosts, only evidence. When she arrived in Redfield, she found the old boxes in the basement, labels curling like dried leaves. One read, "Green, L." She opened it, sneezed at the dust, and saw a photograph of a red sedan half buried in snow. A woman's hand visible on the wheel. Rachel said quietly, "Let's see if you still have something to say." 1. The old detective and the new one. Rachel called retired Detective Hayes. He was 72, half-deaf, and twice as stubborn. When she introduced herself, he said, "If you're calling about Laura Green, you'll need a bigger shovel." She smiled through the phone. "Good thing I brought one." He agreed to meet. His living room smelled of coffee and paper. On the table lay the same Cold Road folder, edges yellowed. Rachel noticed a new item, a letter, typed on yellow paper. "You were right about the brother, M." She asked if he'd traced it. He shook his head. Sometimes you keep a mystery alive just to make sure the truth doesn't die first. Rachel said, "I don't do ghosts." He replied, "You will." 2. Digital resurrection. The first thing Rachel did was digitize the entire file. Photos, reports, tape recordings, all scanned. She uploaded the partial DNA notes Hayes had preserved and requested new testing using touch DNA. The lab said it would take 2 weeks. While waiting, she studied the autopsy photos, the bullet trajectory, the map. Her eyes caught one detail others missed. The car key was in the accessory position, not ignition. Laura's car hadn't been running when the bullet struck. Someone else restarted it later, after she was already gone. That meant the killer stayed. 3. Re-interviewing the past. Rachel tracked down whoever was still alive. Mark Henderson lived 2 counties away, gray-haired, remarried, owner of a repair chain. He agreed to meet at a diner off Route 17. When Rachel showed him the photo of Laura's car, he looked away. "You think I don't see that in my head every night?" She asked about his brother. "Michael, haven't spoken in 20 years. Last I heard, Ohio." He ever owned a .38. Everyone in the 80s owned a .38. He gave a dry laugh, then stared out the window. "You really think it was him?" Rachel didn't answer. She never gave suspects the satisfaction of knowing which side of the mirror they were on. 4. The lab call. 2 weeks later, the call came at 7:14 a.m. Rachel was halfway through a stale donut. "Detective Moore, you're not going to believe this. We pulled a partial print off the casing. Advanced imaging brought it up. It matches a Michael Henderson, born 1951, arrested for assault in '88. Rachel froze. She flipped through the digital file. Hayes's note, Ohio arrest, missing fingerprint cards. "You found him," she whispered. Hayes, when told, simply said, "Took you long enough." 5. The interview in Ohio. Q. Low pulse, 20%. Rachel and a state marshal drove to Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, where Michael Henderson worked as a night janitor in a warehouse. He lived alone in a trailer behind the building. The air smelled of bleach and cigarettes. Michael answered the door in slippers. When Rachel introduced herself, he said, "You people ever let anything stay buried?" She replied, "Depends who's buried." They sat inside, one lamp, one chair, one truth circling. Rachel slid a photo across the table, Laura's face, the car, the casing. "You knew her well," she said. Everybody knew Laura. Not everybody loved her. His jaw tightened. "I didn't kill her." Rachel leaned forward. "Funny, the casing says otherwise." For a moment, nothing. Then his hands trembled, barely. He said, "You can't prove it. It was an accident." Then stopped. The word hung there, accident, and the room changed temperature. 7. The search and the find. With a warrant, police searched Michael's trailer. Inside an old footlocker, under folded work shirts, they found a .38 revolver, barrel rusted, but serial number partially visible. A faded red fabric scrap. A silver locket, Laura Green's. Q. Sharp note, 25%. Fade out slowly. The locket matched the one recovered from the river in 1985. This was its twin half. When pressed together, the cracks aligned. Rachel whispered. She tried to hold on. 8. Justice and denial. Michael was arrested on June 2, 2005.
The press called it the Cold Road Miracle. Redfield called it closure. In interviews, Michael alternated between anger and apology. It was love, he said. Love makes you crazy. Rachel responded, "No, Michael, control makes you crazy." At trial, the defense argued the confession was coerced. The jury heard the tape anyway, his voice cracking on the word accident. They deliberated 4 hours. Verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Sentence, 25 years. 9. The old detective's visit. Q. Soft strings, 15%. After the verdict, Rachel drove to see Hayes. He was in a care home, TV muted, eyes bright. She handed him a newspaper clipping. Brother confesses in 1984 murder. He read it slowly, then nodded. "Told you the ghost would talk." She smiled. "It wasn't a ghost, it was science." "Same thing nowadays," he murmured. He looked out the window at the falling snow and said, "Tell her she can rest now." Rachel asked quietly, "How do I do that?" He answered, "You already did." The letter returns. 1 week later, a letter arrived at the station. No return address. Typed on yellow paper. "You finally found him. I told you the road remembers. M." The initials again. Same font. Same ribbon smudge. Rachel held it to the light. A new fingerprint on the corner. But the lab reported no match in the database. Whoever M was remained one last shadow standing behind the truth. 11. Redfield at peace. By December 2005, snow returned to County Road 9. Rachel stood where Laura's car had been found. The road was quiet. Pines bent under ice. She placed 2 roses, one red, one white, on the ground. "For truth," she said, "and for peace." Then she listened. For once, the road was silent, not because it had nothing left to say, but because it had been heard.
Narrator, steady, reflective. Every town has its secrets. Redfield had only one, but it was enough to shape a generation. For 36 years, people whispered about the woman in the red coat found on County Road 9. They told their children never to stop for strangers. They left flowers by the mile marker and called it Laura's Cross. And somewhere between memory and myth, the truth became something softer, not about murder, but about what happens when silence stays too long. 1. The town's memory. By 2025, the road had been widened. New asphalt, new signs, new lives. But the old path still curved under the pines, where no plow seemed to reach. Drivers said headlights dimmed there for a moment, as if time bent slightly to make room for ghosts. The Redfield Historical Society built a small plaque near the shoulder. In memory of Laura Green, 1957 to 1984. Her story reminds us that the truth never dies. It only waits to be heard. People left notes beneath it. Some said, "Rest in peace." Others said, "I forgive you." No one signed them. Rachel's reflection. Rachel Moore retired in 2024. Her hair had turned silver, her voice softer, but her mind still sharp. In her last interview, a journalist asked, "Detective Moore, after all these years, what stayed with you most about the Cold Road case?" She thought for a long time, then said, "That truth isn't found in blood or bullets. It's in the way people choose to remember. Laura's case taught me that justice is a language, and sometimes the road speaks it for us." When asked if she believed in ghosts, she smiled slightly. "No, but I believe in echoes." The journalist asked what she meant. "Ghosts are things that haunt you. Echoes are things that answer back."
3. The Archives. At the Redfield Police Department, in the basement where Rachel once found the old boxes, there's now a digital archive room. Each file from the Cold Road case has been scanned, tagged, and stored under one name, Legacy File Number 1. Visitors can read it on screen, reports, letters, even the confession. But one item is restricted, the original locket. It sits in a glass case under soft light, still broken, halves never fused. Every January, a school class visits the museum. Teachers tell them the story, not of death, but of remembrance. They teach the children that every clue, every truth, and every silence matters. Some of the kids grow up to become police officers, others writers, some nothing at all. But every one of them remembers the girl in the red coat who once drove down a snowy road and never came back. The reporter's discovery. In 2026, a young journalist named Evelyn Ward began researching Redfield's most famous case. She was born the year Michael Henderson was convicted. Curiosity, not tragedy, drew her to it. While sifting through microfilm, she noticed something odd. The earliest newspaper about the murder mentioned a local teacher, but didn't name her. Only weeks later did the full name appear, and in the first mention, the article was written by a journalist with initials MC. Meredith Clark. The same Meredith who had been Laura's best friend. The same Meredith who'd left Redfield, retired, and disappeared into Florida silence. Evelyn tried to track her down, but found an obituary instead. 2018 Clearwater. Among her belongings, a notebook was recovered. On the first page, one line. The road remembers. Even now, no one knows whether Meredith wrote the threatening letters, or simply echoed the guilt she felt for not saving her friend. Maybe both, maybe neither. In Redfield, truth and ghosts still share the same address. The road's whisper. Late at night, truckers say that stretch of highway hums a little differently. The trees lean closer. Some swear they see a faint red reflection in the snow, not taillights, but a coat. Others say a woman's voice whispers through static radio, one sentence at a time. You're safe now. Keep driving. Rachel never commented on the stories, but she once told a cadet during a lecture, "If you ever hear a voice on an empty road, don't be afraid. It's probably just justice doing a head count." V. Letters never sent. In 2027, a final envelope arrived at the Redfield PD. No stamp, just slid under the door. Inside, a photo of the plaque by the road, covered in snow, and one line written on the back. Some wounds become bridges. M. They tested the handwriting. It matched neither Michael nor Meredith. Rachel smiled when she saw the copy. Maybe M just stands for memory, she said. The road's end. Narrator, slower, lower. The Cold Road case began with a single bullet in 1984 and ended with a single breath in 2005. But its shadow and its lessons never truly left. In the quiet of winter, Redfield sleeps easier now, not because evil vanished, but because it was finally named. And naming something, as every detective knows, is how you take away its power. Laura Green became more than a victim. She became a reminder that no story really ends until someone is willing to listen all the way through. The closing words. This was The Cold Road, the unsolved murder from 1984, a story of silence, memory, and justice delayed but never denied. I'm your narrator, and this has been True Crimes. Remember, every road has a story. Some just take longer to tell.